Okay, so let's talk about how you came up with the deAsra Baba and how you set up and understood the problem as is. So if you can give us an overview of the numbers that you were talking about before and what prompted you to pick this as the big problem you wanted to think about.
Okay, so so thanks Ria for being here first and for being on the interview panel. Um, so as I mentioned, we started deAsra about 10 years back, but even before that, the whole idea was that let's do something meaningful and how do we contribute to the community and the society. And as I look around, it was very clear that entrepreneurship and more importantly, small entrepreneurship is something that I could relate to. So the idea was let's start something that is related to small entrepreneurs. So that was the starting point. And we didn't realize how big the problem was. But let me share some statistics that I got. There are about 63 million MSMEs in India. 97% of them, okay, are less than 10 employee companies. 97%. And most of them are meaning very small businesses. So even though we look at all the jobs that we look at, if you look at in terms of counts, of course, most of the businesses are very small. But if you look at the count, the number of people employed in businesses that are less than 10 employees is 70% of all non-farm employment. So while we talk about large companies and we always talk about big companies and railways, all these other big things, the real jobs are actually happening in the very small businesses. The second problem is that when we look at SME from the government point of view, SME is 250 crores. Up to 250 crores is SME businesses.
Sorry to interrupt, but can you tell us what MSME and SME
Yeah,
is?
MSME is that micro and small medium enterprises. SME is small and medium enterprises. MSME is that micro and small medium enterprises. Right? So SMEs are small and medium enterprises. Government has schemes to say that you must support SMEs and there are all kinds of laws. But SME number that government counts is 250 crores. So if a bank has to give loans, they would much rather give to 100 crore companies than to give to 1 crore 50 lakh companies. So that is a big problem and a lot of these small businesses don't get any support from the government. So this is something we realized much later as to how big the problem was. Our initial thought was, let's help small businesses be more successful. So that's where we started.
So on the same lines, I'm going to ask you another question, which is, so you talked about how we're not looking at the big companies, but we're also just helping people who are educated and have some amount of privilege. Why pick those people and not try to help the people who have nothing?
No, it's not like we don't want to help people who don't have anything. See, there are two parts here. The one thought process was that, the problem is so big, we can only solve some of those. Let's at least try to work on areas where we have some understanding and some capabilities first. So the idea was that let's focus on, we wanted to be very clear that we want to do this at scale. There was no point in trying to say we will help 25 companies because that would have been very different. It's possible to help 25 companies and go deep in them, but that was not the charter. The goal was to see how can we go as broad as we can. And since we were looking at that and we thought we should use technology to do many of these things, we figured let's go after people who can use technology. And that in a way biased us against those who are not tech savvy or any of those things, though that has changed completely now.
Yeah, can I add to what Anand is saying? I think the other reason also, and when I started looking at some of the statistics, it was very interesting to find that educated youth are the most unemployed. So 18% of our educated youth is the most unemployed lot as compared to those who have basic and intermediate education. So one would think the opposite, right? If you're educated, then there is a high likelihood that you would get employed or that you would have some means of livelihood. But it is the exact opposite. So that is, that again validates the fact that, this is a part of society where we thought that they have the privilege, they have access. So therefore, they're going to have all the opportunities to get employed. But that is really not the case. They're underserved. And that is that area that we are looking at.
Yeah, I would add one more thing to this thing and then we can move to the next topic. See, one other thing that we, after reading a lot of different kinds of things, we realize that in India right now, if you look at family income, 55% of the families actually make less than 15,000 rupees a month. And that is a very risky proposition in some sense. And if we can get family income to move beyond 25,000 rupees a month, then they get into a positive spiral. They are able to invest in other things, education, whatever else that can be done. So one of our objectives of creating deAsra was to see that we will focus on business plans where every family, meaning every employee who is employed in our ecosystem, earns at least 25,000 rupees a month. So that basically made it difficult to look at very tiny businesses, because then it's very hard to build a business model where they will earn 25,000 rupees a month. And it was important that we don't take people's time and not show them a path to make at least that much money.
Can I add something? Just adding something to what has been said to now. I think there were three important points which came out. That lot of actually employment generation is happening at the small and micro level, not so much in the large, because in the large industry it is primarily a jobless growth that we are seeing for almost a couple of decades or more. You also said about youth who are educated but unemployed. I think it has something to do also that education has so far shaped people for jobs. So they have been looking for jobs rather than looking at ways by which they could themselves start something. And that is where I think deAsra role comes very much. But one more way I would like to say, you talked about 15,000 rupees as the family income. If you look at the national level, and here I'm going to take a little bit of the rural perspective from where I come, you find that almost 65% of the population is still in agriculture or in wage labor relating to agriculture. So we are talking of almost 65%, that's almost 100 crores. So 100 crore family, 100 crore population, and that many families are probably at a stage where they are still depending on the primary production of agriculture as the main source of income. And that is going to be almost impossible for the future, because primary sector is going to not give so many opportunities. So if we have to, the growth of primary sector is already stagnated in the main areas like cereal production. The growth is now happening in the high value agriculture, which is dairy and meat and vegetables and fruits. But then the whole agriculture sector is transforming. And if that is, the transformation is to be used for creating livelihoods, I won't say jobs. We are not talking of jobs, we are not talking of, so we are talking of livelihoods, which also means entrepreneurship. And there is therefore a shift required for this 2/3 of the Indian population to an entrepreneurship mode rather than a job mode. And that is where I think what deAsra is doing becomes very important.